meeting will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. It is also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. The meeting today is open to the public except for one item that contains exempt information. Item 12 will...
My mistake. There's nothing.
There's nothing, is there? No. Yeah, I was going to say.
Sorry.
There's nothing that it contains exempt information. Sorry, too much reading from the script. I sort of vaguely knew this. We have received no public petitions, questions or statements. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for the day. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instructions from the Town Hall staff. The assembly point is Tudor Square. Can I now ask members of the committee to introduce themselves? I'll start with me. I'm Tim Huggan, I'm Chair of the Audit and Standards Committee, and I'll go to the left.
I'm David Hollis, General Counsel.
Councillor Gareth Slater, Southey Ward.
Simon Clement Jones, Councillor for Bridgeton Greenhill Ward.
Councillor Matt Dwyer, Councillor for Burley Ward.
Laura Moynihan, Councillor for Manor Castle Ward.
Stephen Bauer, I'm one of the Internal Audit and Risk Managers for the Council.
Linda Hunter, Senior Finance Manager, Internal Audit and Risk Management.
I'm Tim Cutler, I lead the External Audit for KPMG.
I'm Matthew Moore, I'm the Senior Manager for KPMG on the External Audit.
Maroon Fraff, Councillor Netheridge and Sharrow.
Councillor Terry Fox, Manor Castle Ward.
Hi, Harshan, I'm an independent cooperative member. I work for AUS as a product development and innovation manager.
Hi, Ursula Morikan, independent cooperative member. I work at the University of Sheffield as a lecturer.
And James Brackley, independent cooperative member.
Thank you for that. Welcome Harshan, welcome Oslam to the committee today. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank James Buckley, who's an independent cooperative member of this committee, and for his contribution and commitment to the committee over the last few years. So thank you very much. I know there is a letter of thanks going to go to you. Thank you very much. Right, okay, we'll move on to item 2. Apologies for absence. There are no apologies for absence. Item 3, exclusion of the press and public. There are no items that require the exclusion of the press and public. I'll get that right this time. Right, item 4, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest in any of the items of business on the agenda? If so, please ask, if you have one. No? Give it a few seconds. That's good. Right, item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. Can members approve the correct record of the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of July 2025? I'll take that as read then. No. Okay. Item 6, no public petitions, questions or petitions have been submitted. And we move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the Internal Audit Fraud Report. Right, so welcome the presenting officer, who's Stephen Bauer. Hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I know you've all had a copy of the report, so you've had time to study it and no doubt decide on a few questions for us. Just to run through the basics behind this is the annual report, which covers not only the work that we've done in internal audit, but we try to cover a little bit wider than that. So there are other areas of the council that are involved in fraud detection, etc. There's a team in housing, there's people in blue badges who deal with that sort of issue. The only area we don't cover in reporting, because it's more public facing, is trading standards. So that's a key bit. And the other thing, if members have not been aware, for quite a few years now, we don't cover housing frauds, benefits frauds. They're now covered by DWP. They took over that role from us. So the purpose is to inform you what we've been doing for the last year, what we're intending to do for next year. Just to let you know, there are a whole suite of policies which sit behind this, which look at anti-fraud and corruption statements. We have a fraud risk document. We also have fraud response plans, which all fit together, anti-money laundering, anti-bribery and corruption policies. The reason I mention these is they have been to this committee. They came last year. We tend to review them in full every couple of years, and that was last year. And they all came to this committee. There has been minor changes this year, as people have left and things have slightly changed, but there's nothing of significance. Just for the benefit of our friends from External Audit, there are no major frauds that we are aware of which would affect their accounts. We have found issues throughout the year, but these are at a minor level. And for an organisation the size that we are, covering the number of areas and interactions with the public, it would be surprising if we didn't have some of those. One of the new areas we're looking at this year is the new statutory offence of failure to prevent fraud. This is part of the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act. And the key defence to that is to have a robust process for controlling, reporting fraud, etc. So we've gone through and we've looked at all the commitments we need to do in there. So we need top-level commitment. We've got a risk assessment, which we're constantly updating. That we've got proportionate risk-based prevention procedures, due diligence. We've got a communication strategy to all our members of staff. So we cover things like the Office of Code of Conduct, it's in there, and we have monitoring and review. And finally, we have a report back to you every year, just to show what we've been doing and to let the wider public know. It's always interesting when we do this report. I don't know if you've seen it in the press. We have appeared on Look North this week, particularly picking up on a couple of issues to do with the blue badges and the missing laptops within the service. Which, bear in mind, we're talking 27 laptops there. Sorry, £27,000. I think it's 32 laptops. That's out of a number of about 6,000, so it's not large. However, there is a process going off at the moment to refresh a lot of the laptops, and we'll see how that reports by the end of November. So that'll be next year's report. I've put in the reactive work. This is the work that we've done when we become aware of issues. We have a reporting hotline where people can report in. We also get a lot of things which are, if you like, supplementary to issues which may be going off in services to do with code of conduct issues in HR, and we become aware of those as we're going along and they get reported to us. So we've had 49 cases reported to us. We conducted 23 of those. 26 we gave advice to managers to be involved in. And there's a number of different types of frauds in there. So criminal gangs in particular are always trying to attack us on bank mandate fraud. And if you know what bank mandate fraud is, but if not, it's where they actually send in a letter to us purporting to be from British Gas or whoever and say, please change our bank account details and pay us instead of British Gas. I'm not going into the process that we have, but we have strong controls in there to make sure we don't make those payments. We always go through, there's a number of outcomes, quite a lot of those that we start looking at lead to nothing. There is nothing to you. If not, we have standard policies and procedures within the council, and we take them through in some cases to dismissal as appropriate. So there's a number of those which go through every year. There's certainly things like disappearance of small amounts of cash, falsification of timesheets. So with an organisation the size of this one, you will always get some of that stuff coming through. During investigations, if you find any control weaknesses, being auditors, we will always report that back to managers so that improvements can be made. And we liaise with several different organisations. So we deal with DWP, other core cities, South and West Yorkshire, and we're part of the North West Auditors Forum, and we're also part of an organisation called NAFN, which is the National Anti-Fraud Network. That's run by Salford Council. We contribute a small amount into that, and then we get the feedback and access to other information. Some of the highlights that we've gone through, the blue badges, we have a number of those which come through every year where people have inappropriately used them. It's a bit less this year actually than last year, and we're hoping that the sort of good publicity we get from the press discourages people from using them. In those cases, we'll take the badges off the people, we'll give them a penalty notice if the person's not present. I'll not go through how we go through that, but it's quite interesting how we check whether they're not present. And then the badges are actually returned to the rightful owner with a note telling them, you know, not telling them out, etc. to other people. We didn't do any prosecutions last year, although we are looking to do some going forward this year. Tenancy and right to buy. Just one thing to note in there, we've had two long-standing members of staff who've done the housing and tenancy fraud, one of which has been very seriously ill and the other one has moved on to another part of the organisation. So we had a small gap in there, which may explain why some of the cases haven't been followed up quite as diligently. However, the new members of staff, we're going to do a piece of work in there just to make sure it's all right. They've actually done a lot of work to catch up on that, and they are very diligent in dealing with it. We also, due to changes in the budget last year, we've had a lot of extra right to buy cases come through, so they've been working on that. And we've actually tried to support them. We have some time to look at NFI stuff, and we've done some of the housing tenancy ones that's come through, but I'll explain about NFI shortly. I've gone through bank mandate fraud. We get some things through whistleblowing. We don't get a massive amount, and we are looking, I sit on a group with David and the head of HR, and we are looking to publish our new whistleblowing policy shortly, and no doubt that will bring us some more whistleblowing through. But we always listen diligently, and we try and follow up on all those issues that come through. We've got some proactive fraud work that we did last year, which were in last year's plan, and that didn't identify any particular issues. We always do about 4. These are areas which have significant fraud potential, such things as housing tenancy fraud, and we go through that and make sure that the controls are up to date. And what we've got to look at this year, we're looking at service level fraud risk registers, a review of the processes for managing housing tenancy fraud. We're currently looking at bus lane enforcement write-offs, and we're going to look at the housing services data systems, because data theft is quite a significant one, and we deal with things like the National Fraud Agency and the London City Police who deal on fraud nationally, and data is a significant issue. You only need to look at some of the cases such as Marks and Spencer's or Jaguar Land Rover, where you can see the sorts of issues that we get. Data security is a separate issue, but some of the things do overlap. We've got a fraud e-learning package which has gone out to all staff to use. It's a requirement for managers. It's on their list of required learning. And we're also looking at a new package this year, which we're hoping to roll out shortly, which will update that and we'll start again. We're trying to make sure that it's up to date, it's current, and it's new information that's coming out, because fraud is a multi-billion-pound industry, and criminals no longer go and with a shotgun and take the local post office out. They're more likely just to subtly contact you in an email. Internal audit resources, we use about 246 days of our time. That's about 16%. That's been fairly static. I'm one of the accredited counter fraud specialists. I've got another one that works with me, and a third one who's on maternity leave at the moment, so we can cover all the aspects. Plus we can call on additional resources if we need to. The time in our audit plan covers the investigations that we undertake, time to undertake work on the National Fraud Initiative, proactive activities on fraud reviews, and time undertaken as part of the housing benefits process. So we cover a lot of areas within that time. The NFI, I presume you've all come across the NFI. This is data that we send a number of packages, so we send all sorts of things, our payroll, we send our creditors, debtors, etc. to the Cabinet Office. We've been doing this for about 20 years. It's all, so there's parts of the piece where we have to make sure that we've got all the data privacy notices so people know that's what we're doing. We recover and send that data, and then we get a number of matches back. So it might be a lot. The big one is always people who've got a blue badge and have not informed us and are deceased. So we can at least cancel the blue badges off and request those blue badges come back to us. So we get a whole number. At the moment, we got these back in February this year. We'd identified 118 errors and 1 fraud case with a total value of £395,000. So that's currently being recovered through the process. But we had nearly 12,000 matches. A lot of the matches we get, to be fair, are timing differences that we catch, although they are getting a lot better at filtering that out for us. So we deal with that. We have reported for the first time some thefts and losses. This is not because they are new, it's just we've been able to get all the more information, and we're looking so we can give a much broader picture. So there are, I think it's 8 mobile phones which have gone missing. I will say before we start, all the data on these items are locked. They can't get back into them. We locked the networks up so they can't get into them. And we've had 14 laptops disappear, but we have got 32 laptops worth £27,000, which have been reported in the press. And these are people who've left the organisation and not returned their kit. That's been chased up and will be chased up again. However, if we don't get those back, then we'll be reporting it as theft. And normally when we get down to that stage, it's surprising how quickly we hear tyre skids outside bringing the stuff back to us. I have done a checklist at the end of this document for members to show the sort of areas that we look at, consider to make sure that the governance arrangements of the council are adequate to try and prevent, detect fraud, and when we do detect it, that we have the appropriate processes to follow that through. So the recommendations are that you accept this report.
No worries, we do that. We've all done that. Gareth first.
Yeah, just a bit of a processy question. Sorry, just a processy question. On page 23, it's saying we'll be getting a regular report on the failure to prevent fraud side of things. Will that be in next year's fraud report, or will it be a separate report? And does that meet the requirements of the Act? So, 2 questions.
Yeah, we will report back on any issues as we find those in next year's report, or if for some reason there's a particular issue, we'd report it back earlier than that. But as far as we're concerned, we've gone through the Act in fine detail. There's always things we can improve on it, and we constantly, but our basic is that we have got enough to cover ourselves under the Act. A lot of the things that we're looking at there are particularly covered by the, very similar to the Bribery Act. So when we did that piece of work and we went through it, although it doesn't cover a lot of people in the organisation, we made sure we got our processes and we cover that. And that's why we do things like the information that we cover off with core cities, etc., to make sure that we're as good and hopefully better than the other organisations in that area.
Bruce, I had you.
Thank you. just in regards to computer misuse cases, why have they risen so much in the past 4 years, and why is it being reported over a 4-year period rather than on a year-on-year basis?
Pardon, but I'm not quite sure when in the report that is.
Oh, okay. So just bear with me. Okay, so this is on page 21, paragraph 10. Number of computer misuse cases has also risen 96% in the past 4 years. So my question really is, why are we reporting on a 4-year basis rather than a year-on-year basis? Because I believe that gives an inaccurate picture. And why have they risen so much?
That little bit in the background is not in Sheffield. That is the sort of national picture, so we can judge ourselves against it. There has been more because it's an area that criminal activity are moving into. I went to a course fairly recently with the FOI. Actually, they have a crime team that deals with fraud issues, and they were explaining just how much individual pieces of data are worth. So me having a list of all you and saying you're a councillor at Sheffield City Council, to be fair, it's open knowledge, it's not worth a lot, but there are other pieces of information that I'll not want to go into where if you can get hold of it very quickly, one I will mention is things like if you have a car accident, if you can get hold of that information within an hour of you phoning the insurance companies, that is worth a lot of money, and they will pay a lot of money out. So it's worth their while getting people into organisations to access that information.
That's fine. Apologies for misreading that. My next question is around our approach to fraud. Do we have a zero tolerance approach to fraud? If we do, how many employees in the past 12 months have been reported to the police about their fraudulent activities?
I wouldn't know all the ones that's gone to the police because that's normally a service area, although we would report it and we would record it. I don't want to go into that information as to how many.
Okay, so would that suggest that we don't have a zero tolerance approach to fraud?
We do have a zero tolerance to fraud. Some of the items are taken internally. So somebody who, to be fair, who's fiddled 5 hours on their timesheet, we're not likely to go to the police because they won't be interested in it. But the more significant ones, they are. You know, we have a zero tolerance and we will go wherever possible and prosecute that.
Would you agree theft of the public purse is theft of the public purse, whether it's 5 hours or £500,000?
It would, but however, you know, councillors may have a pen or whatever that they've got and they sign their own cheque with it. That is not something that the police would be interested in, and I would probably be prosecuted for reporting that, for wasting police time.
Thank you. Just in regards to what you said about phones, and we're able to lock down the phones, are we able to lock down laptops similar to how we can lock down phones?
Yes, all our laptops are all locked down. We have a system, I can't remember the name of it for the life of me, but every time, I think it's Fox Pro, every time you lock into your system, if you shut your system down, you have to put a security code into as well. And the first thing that we know when we get any issues, we just lock people out of our systems.
That's fine.
I've done that last week, so I know we've done that to people.
And my final question is in regards to ex-employees thieving machines. Why are we not, or do we withhold the final pay? If not, why not, until all council assets are returned?
That would be a very, very good thing to do. However, quite often people, you know, you're working while the end of the month, you get paid at the end of the month, and you've got the laptop, and sometimes other people have left and not followed that up. We encourage people, we get people to write to them, but funnily enough, when you start writing to them and saying, if it's not returned, this will be counted as theft and may be reported or will be reported to the police, then it's surprising how fast they all come back in.
That's fine, sorry, apologies. One last question then. Just in regards to that £32,000 figure you mentioned.
Yeah.
How much of that is from over 12 months ago?
I don't know that. They've only just started collating this information for us, so I don't know how long that goes back, but I don't think it'll be a lot. It'll be over the last few months.
Thank you.
Matt?
Thanks. It was a really comprehensive report as always, and it was just on a point. I think we brought it up last year, and it was on the fraud e-learning, and it's mandatory for managers.
Yeah.
And we're still only at 75% of designated managers have carried out. And obviously, the reason we want to carry out this training is to be observant, avoid issues rather than chasing things up after the fact. Nip it in the bud. So I don't know if there's when do we expect us to get compliant and get all 100% of managers as close as feasible possible to it? But someone will leave and it gets to 99.
There'll always be people that are on this. We're hoping to get the new one out later in the year. So once we've got that done, then we'll start a new campaign to get people to do it. We always get the issue that some people say, I don't need to do it because I did the previous one, and it's pushing them along to do that. So that's where we're moving from.
Laura?
Just want to follow up on, was that it? Yeah. Just want to follow up on that, because if it's mandatory, it's mandatory. If they say they're not going to do it, then it's a disciplinary process, bluntly. It's not an option. Equal opportunities isn't an option. Fraud prevention should be an option not to do. And I really worry because a lot of this is around miscommunication. We know what happens within services, and particularly where it says in here that service managers are going to be responsible for doing it. Without certain skills, not everybody's got those skills. If you're a service manager in a particular department, you might not have extensive HR or, know the procedures around fraud prevention. So I think we've really got to make it absolutely clear that if they don't do this, there will be sanctions.
That's an HR issue that we do encourage people to do it. Equally, we provide managers with support. So when people, on this particular one, where people leave, the managers are, told what their responsibilities are. They know that they need to collect in badges and other items which belong to us. So it's not that we don't provide the support from us and HR, etc.
Laura, would you like us to, because we could put an additional recommendation in to put that, would you like to put something along those lines?
Yes, because we can have all the systems in the world, but if we don't provide the training to deliver it, it's meaningless. So I'd like something in there is to make sure that the mandatory e-learning is ramped up and that all managers are expected to undergo that training. Something along those lines. I'll leave it to David's eloquent words too.
Yeah, I think we can.
Could I suggest something along the lines of if managers don't complete the e-learning within a set period, then they will be locked out of the system and faced with a disciplinary, just like normal employees would.
I'd rather it be positive, but I do think they have to do it. And I can see a scenario where it comes before those of us who are on the appeals against dismissal, where a manager says, I didn't have the relevant training. And I've seen instances where we've dealt with that. So I think we've got to cover ourselves in this area.
I seem to have stopped flashing now. So I think consideration has been given as to whether we lock out people from the system for all the mandatory training as we do for others. I think that is something that we have considered and taken through, but decided that actually, given the extent of that, it may not be practicable that we do it for all of them. Whether in relation to a specific recommendation, can I suggest that that rather than have a specific recommendation, because actually we need to work out what the action is, that we make a note of the minutes so that we can pick that up and report back.
Wouldn't a better way be to something like that we, in order to protect the council against fraud, that the officers consider appropriate actions that would be actions that would be appropriate to further strengthen the council's own processes, or something along that line.
Or further consider the strengthening the
level of mandatory training.
The level of mandatory training, yeah.
Yeah, I just think if it's mandatory, it's mandatory. If it's not mandatory, it's voluntary. It can't be either or. So if it's a condition of your role that you undergo this training, well, to be doing your role satisfactorily, then you must take the training. Otherwise, there's an issue of performance. There's a performance issue there if somebody's unwilling to do the training.
Do you have an opinion of whether this would, because I mean, I think it's something that we need to, as a committee, that I get that we need to strengthen. Would that help you in your role to manage?
It would do. I'd just like to say, I'll take that forward. Certainly, you know, I can impress that it's the members' will that this happens. But I think it would be useful to do it at the time when we bring in the new process. So that will certainly happen before next April, but just when, I'm not quite sure. It's in development. So once we've done that, then we can say this is a new piece of package and members require it to be done, and that's part of officers.
But I'd like that as an additional clause. I think that just says that this is the strength of the committee, that this is what we would like, just so that it's in the minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that there is the review of what the mandatory training is and rolling that out. So I think we probably pick it up as part of that. So if there's a recommendation that as part of that review and rolling out of the mandatory training, that this committee requests that the consideration is given to the consequences of not doing that, of it not being undertaken.
I just want to say we were sat here last year saying the same things. We're sat here this year saying the same things. We'll be sat here next year saying the same things. We've got a zero tolerance approach towards fraud. Why don't we have a zero tolerance approach to e-learning? Do the work. That's what we're getting paid for.
I don't know if you have like KPIs. You could set this as one of your KPIs so it could be tracked.
It's one of the KPIs we look at as part of this, but it's not something. It's not our responsibility for managers to do the training. That's an HR issue. So we'll certainly feed that back as part of the new training package and say, you know, we're going to be closely monitoring this, and the members will be closely monitoring through this committee. And we need to make sure it will never get to 100%. I know that people leave, etc. But we want to get as close as we possibly can to that.
Can there be any incentives for them to do the training? Will that help?
I don't want to carry on too much, but if you've got a proposal,
yes,
anybody put. I think we're along the right lines. Just got to get the.
It's just something that was just said about we'll never get to 100%. So if we'll never get to 100%, then why do we have it?
Yeah, sorry, speaking for Stephen, I think you never get to 100% because you've got people off sick, people who are, you know, come and go, so have been here, not completed it and then have left. So you'll never have 100%, but that's not to say you shouldn't have everybody who is here and working doing the e-learning.
I don't want to drag this on. I'm regretting bringing it up now. But, I mean, people are paid to do the job. So, you know, that is why they should do mandatory training. It's mandatory training. I think if somebody refused to do equal opportunities training, we'd take a very serious approach to that. This is protecting the finance of the organisation. So I know it's not your responsibility, but can we refer this to HR? Can we put in something that we ask HR to ensure that all managers undertake the mandatory training and put it on them to come up with a plan to do that, because otherwise we're going to hit a brick wall. And I think if we don't do that, then we're not fulfilling our duty under the legislation. We're leaving a weakness there. We said how we're complying with the legislation, but if we're not ensuring people do mandatory training to prevent fraud, I would suggest we're not fulfilling our duties 100% under the legislation.
Have we come to a form of words that we like with that?
Give me 2 minutes.
Yeah. Give Dave 2 minutes. James?
Just while you're preparing that word in, just on page 28, the reactive work undertaken, I wonder if some of that could include more on outcomes perhaps in future. So that's the section, it talks about the number of cases reported. Because I was reading on the subsequent sections on like blue badges and then on housing tenancy and right to buy, you've got quite detailed stats on like, you know, how many cases were reported onto the police, how much was recovered. But in that specific section, you only have kind of how many cases were reported. So, you know, what was the outcomes on those cases? Did they progress to disciplinaries? Was a certain amount of assets recovered or not? I mean, that's just for future reference, I'd say.
We can certainly add that in. That's something that we've got the information on, so we can put that in for next year.
Dave, another few seconds. So I have got a question. When you talk about the tenancies when they're subletting, where amongst this does Airbnbs fall if they're sort of does that get investigated? You know, the Airbnb type subletting out accommodation, and where does that sit in the process? Does it sit under a fraud process because they're subletting potentially properties and whole properties? How do we pick up on this? Is that something that is your job, or is it something somewhere else?
Tenancy fraud would certainly pick up on that. So if anybody's aware of Airbnb being used, then they would take that on board and look at it.
Anybody else got any other questions? We're just waiting for a second.
How about recommends that as part of the review of mandatory training for managers, consideration be given to the to how compliance is monitored and enforced.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. And then will that come back?
We can bring that back.
Bring that back, please, because that's something that we need to come back to. That is everybody happy with that as an additional? So I'll go through, because obviously we're asked to note the report. We've got the council's in policies in relation to fraud and corruption have been reviewed and fulfilled the required governance arranged to the council, and note the completed checklist with the additional clause that you've Dave has read out to us. Are we happy with that as a proposal?
Sorry, David, could you just repeat your wording, please?
The recommendation is that as part of the review of mandatory training for managers, consideration is given to how compliance is monitored and enforced.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll take that as read. I don't see any dissent to that. Okay, thank you very much for your time for that item on the agenda, and carry on the work of cracking down on fraud, because it costs us all in the end. Thank you very much. Right. Right, we'll move on to item 8. We've got the value for money risk assessment 24-25. Presenting officers Tim Cutler and Matthew Moore of KPMG. Hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As an auditor, I was absolutely delighted with the focus on fraud in that conversation. Keep it up. You recall, going back to the May meeting, we presented a draft audit plan to you, and in that plan, the focus was very much on the financial statements aspect of our audit, how we're going to go about that. Just for assurance to members this evening, that financial statements audit is progressing. It's progressing well, so there's no reason why we shouldn't be in a position to conclude that aspect of the audit by the backstop date as we sit here this evening. What we're bringing to you this evening is very much the other half of our duties as an auditor. So as an external auditor to local government, we have two main duties, that on the financial statements, but also to provide a conclusion around value for money. And in doing that, and we set out some of the scope of this work in the report that you have, it is to focus on the arrangements that management put in place around three key sub-criteria. First one of those is financial sustainability, very much focusing on the budgeting processes and decision-making around those, the budget, savings, etc. There's also governance, and looking at the governance structures within the organisation to check they're robust and fit for purpose for a local authority of this size and complexity. And the third area is around what we call the use of resources, and it's very much how the local authority will enter into decisions with third parties, partnerships, use data at its disposal. So I'll hand over to Matt shortly to go through each of the individual areas, but what I would say, in the commentary that accompanies our risk assessment, you will see that we do talk positively about quite a few of the authority's arrangements, but by nature as an auditor we tend to focus on where we have concern. So we've highlighted 6 areas in the report, 5 of which are new areas for this year, 3 of which focus on the area of financial sustainability, 2 of which focus on that use of resources or improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. There's also one area which was followed on from last year's value for money conclusion. So members that were involved last year will recall that we did raise a significant weakness around the housing regulator and in particular the C3 grading that the authority was given last year. So as part of our work moving to the year end, we will follow up on the authority's response to that regulatory breach. But I'll hand over to Matt now to take you through the other 5 areas and welcome any questions afterwards.
Okay, thanks Tim. So on page 5 is the first one, which is around medium-term budget pressures and the future Sheffield programme, which is being used as a project of transformation, which both will help support services for the future, but also help to get the council back onto a sustainable financial position. So what we will be doing is assessing the arrangements that have been put in place to ensure that those projects, both in terms of delivering the impact on the financial sustainability. So it's looking at how the council is planning to do things. So are the plans robust? Is there clear evidence that what's been planned will likely to achieve? So that's one area we will follow up. The second one is adult social care and the budget pressures. So again, during the 24-25 year, overspending in the adult social care area was again prevalent through the financial reporting, and it's really looking in terms of how the council are reviewing the action plans that they've got to actually identify and mitigate the risks, making sure that understanding how that then feeds into the budget setting process for 25-26. So then looking in to see how that overspend is being mitigated each year. So that's in terms of the second risk. The third one, on equal value claims, there's been a process to understand the equal value claims, and we've followed that up last year, but we'll follow it through again this year to see how that will work its way through and be paid for and understand that process. So the fourth one, again, which is a inspectorate issue, is around the Care Quality Commission Ofsted of Send inspection of the local area partnership. So it's about understanding how the council's partnership working in that area, how they're going to look at how they're dealing with the inspection report, how they're working alongside the inspectors, and then what's the plans of action and the key risks to understand that. So that's on the Care Quality Commission. Family time, this is following an internal audit report which identified some cases where there is an issue about some of the legality. So we will follow that up alongside internal audit to see how things are improving, etc. To ensure that those risks are now being mitigated. And then the final one, as Tim said, is the follow-up from last year around the housing regulator judgment. And we'll follow those up with the housing directorate to understand how those actions are being mitigated and working through. And so it's really to really understand what the council are doing to mitigate the risks that have been identified earlier in the process, to then be able to come to our conclusion judgment over whether those arrangements are effective and adequate.
Okay. Hopefully that made sense as an approach to value for money. Again, we'll come back to you later in the year. I thought it was important this evening just to give you a heads up, if you like, on the areas that we have some concerns about. No doubt these will be areas that you will discuss in other meetings and committees, but again, just to let you know, we will be looking at them. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Simon first.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the report. I know it's in a new format. It kind of gives the headlines at the top, so it's a bit easier to dig into. So thank you for that. I'd like to dig into the BIPS budget improvement plans. Obviously, credit where credit's due. They've delivered a lot more than they have in the past, and that trend is going up. My concern with this is that actually, is this kind of, is it going to be well, is it possible it could be leaking out of other areas? In that, were the targets lower, which made the BIPs easier to deliver, the budget improvement plans easier to deliver, because obviously it's turned out that the overall budget size wasn't correct for the year, if you kind of see what I mean. So yeah, it's is it going to cause a problem in a different area? For instance, the actual setting of the budget, because they know they can't deliver that amount of BIPs. Have you got a sense of that?
Yeah, no, absolutely I have. I mean, it's a concern shared, I would say, with probably every local government audit committee we attend, in that when you are setting a budget, quite often you look at that savings figure as a balancing figure, rather than actually it be a bottom-up construction of savings which are properly risk assessed and transparent to the members where that risk might be. So that is what we are looking at through our arrangements review. So we believe, the BIPS process is not just a balancing figure. We can see that they are made up of a number of different schemes. And when we refer to some of the follow-up work that we will do, it is our intention to look into some of those schemes in a little bit more detail to check that there's underlying evidence to support whatever risk assessment has been presented to members. Now, when we look at whether or not there's a significant weakness associated with that, there has to be a degree of materiality, to use an auditor's term. So clearly there will be a reasonable ambition at the start of a financial year to achieve a certain savings figure with savings identified. Inevitably, things change during the course of the year. So again, some of the things we look at is the monitoring process through the year and the flexibility if and when things change in different savings schemes areas. Is that reported to you? How is the savings figure updated? So, as I said, we can't give you the answer yet because at the point we're just at a risk assessment, but these are the areas that we'll focus on. And clearly we've identified social care as an area of particular budget pressure for that focus.
I mean, that's the thing, because in social care, the overall figure, you know, wasn't correct. I mean, obviously, it's never going to be correct. But obviously, it's overspent by a great deal. And had that been the budget, and obviously, we're now looking at that being obviously the budget going forward. And so, my concern is around the moving of the targets, so that the BIPS process can be, we can be assured that the BIPS process is working. But as I say, it's what we really want assurances on is that other processes won't be. But so thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I mean, just to respond back quickly, I think there's two aspects to this which we bring out in our report, because yes, the savings figure is important, it's the way you recover the situation, but clearly it's the forecasting process as well which can prevent that issue arising in the first place. So as part of our work, we'll be looking at both of those. How has the forecasting process improved to try and prevent that pressure in future years, as well as looking at the risk assessment of individual savings schemes?
Matt? Yeah, I had two questions, but you've just answered one, because one was on the adult social care. Was it an issue of when we set the budget, and the point we set it was that could it have been avoided? So the other one was on future Sheffield, and you've put it as an area of concern, and it's the risks, the arrangements aren't, we've not got adequate arrangements in place to either, it's not clear if it's to deliver the proposed savings or the timeline of the savings, or is it both? What are the areas of concern with future Sheffield that you have?
So this is something that comes up in virtually every meeting with the officers that we have, and what strikes us is there's, you know, a huge pressure on that officer capacity to do all of this. You know, even in our report, you'll see quite a few different areas which have the potential to prevent that future Sheffield programme operating as effectively as it could be, not least the equal value issue and the resolution of that. So what we're keeping an eye on is how do this schedule of projects and programmes, similar to my comment on the savings question, how are these constantly being monitored and reappraised for realism, if you like? Will they all be able to be delivered along the timelines that are suggested? Are there robust project management arrangements in place to implement each of those schemes on a timely basis? Now, we're not going to be able to look at the entirety of it, but what we will do, and I think we indicate this in the report, is we'll try and look at one or two of the schemes that are looking to start more quickly or sooner, and maybe look at the arrangements around those.
Laura?
Again, that's one of my questions, so I won't ask that one. As is the forecasting. I mean, the forecasting's really important here, because some, like adult social care, you can't, it's demand-led. You can't forecast it very effectively, because it will always be demand-led. You can look at benchmarking against other core cities, but I imagine the same problems will be happening in many authorities. For me, what about timescales? Because if we're going to be we'll be starting soon on the budget process, and we need the answers to some of these pretty quickly, particularly, say, future Sheffield, because if we're depending on future Sheffield to achieve savings that maybe are not possible to achieve, then we need to know that sooner rather than later, so that we can forecast more effectively. So if you could just tell me the timescales, and you're looking like you're not welcoming that one, but it is really important to us as members that we have the best available information on which to base our decisions.
I'll answer the question as best I can. Clearly our work is to be concluded by the time of the next backstop date, which is the end of February 26. Now that will coincide there or thereabouts with your next budget cycle. What we will hopefully do, and I say hopefully, is conclude our work slightly before that to allow proper processes to take place. But again, I don't want to give the impression that we're doing a full due diligence of the future Sheffield programme. That's not what we're there to do. What we will be doing is looking at the high-level project management arrangements, and as I say, a couple of specific schemes that are due to start sooner. So, depending on what that says, it may either give you the assurance you need that things with the future Sheffield programme are where they need to be, or if the two programmes, for example, we look at, we find to be deficient in some way, or the assumptions made are not appropriate, that might then be something that members wish to discuss at a later point.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Chair. So my kind of question straddles both finance and governance, so I'd kind of put that in together. So I take it your company will do a lot of this work with a lot of authorities across the country. So in a number of the boxes, you've said how the council ensures decisions receive appropriate scrutiny. Now, as a council, maybe 2-3 years ago, we changed the way we work and we got rid of our scrutiny boards. So years ago, we would have probably called yourselves into a scrutiny board where an in-depth scrutiny, whether it be Future Sheffield, whether it be adult social care, etc., would go into that financial package. I'm trying to get to the question. As a member, one of our main tasks is setting a budget in March. You say you're coming in February. That doesn't give us a lot of time as decision makers to have that overall view. Previously, we would have had the opportunity at the scrutiny board to scrutinise some of your findings, etc. So I'm just wondering, because I'm not seeing in here how you define what that type of scrutiny needs to be from a member's. I've heard yourself from officers, but from a member's point of view, who set the budgets in March, where is your view that that scrutiny needs to be led and member-led cross-party?
So, I mean, in this context, it's probably an unfortunate choice of words, because I agree, scrutiny committees are quite a common thing in local government. What we're really meaning there is challenge, you know, an actual oversight and challenge of decisions informed by the appropriate level of information. So I used the example when we were talking about the saving schemes before. Is it clear to you as a member when you're looking at some of this information what assumptions are being made? Is it clear to you how the risk assessment has been put on a certain scheme? And they're the sort of questions I would expect, if it's not clear in the documentation, that members would ask that. So, you know, whether it's an assumption around a Future Sheffield programme or a savings scheme, you know, where can you tell where judgments are being made? In the same way that when we present our audit report, we will give you a commentary around the judgment over valuation of assets, for example, because it's not a point fact. It could be an assumption. So you could be assuming in your budget sort of 3% inflation, for example. Is that something that is clear and factual, or is it an assumption that you would want to challenge as a member to understand? Is that a reasonable judgment to make as you approve the budget?
And thanks for that, because that clarifies that. But the assumption and expectation are where the gulf is in this kind of situation. And previously, we would have had the cabinet member outlining the financial report coming through. We would have then, if you want, on the run-up to the budget, we would have had a scrutiny where we would have cross-party. At the moment, we've got a finance committee, and the rest of the members are took through in another process. So I'm just wondering where maybe you say challenge and scrutiny, etc. in here, but I don't see in this report, from a member's point of view, I see it from an organisation and authority, but from a member's point of view, setting up what you're trying to put in here on a value for money basis to highlight to members when making that decision. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, so are you saying, because we will come back with a commentary on this, for example, where we can sort of tighten up some of the language you use. So I would say in the context of what you've just said, where we talk about challenge around budgets, for example, yes, I would expect that to be primarily the Finance Committee, but then ultimately the full council when you approve that budget.
James.
Thank you, and thanks for the report. I was encouraged to see in there some points on outcomes, and point 4 on area send inspections particularly is a good example of that, because traditionally, or in the last decade anyway, you know, value for money in local government can often become, you know, about cost cutting. But actually there's and outcomes can be seen as a nice to have sometimes across the sector. But actually, as you highlight there, outcomes might also mean, you know, failing very important statutory duties. Outcome might also come with a cost implication. You know, you might save £1 million now, but it might cost you £3 million down the line. So I think there's a real role for the external auditors in driving that kind of outcomes focus. So my question, building on that premise, is when it comes to making recommendations on this stuff, are you looking at the budget on a line-by-line basis to the extent that they, you know, some of the big areas in the areas that you're identifying around SEND, for instance, are you looking over the budget to see how savings in this area are specifically measured and whether there's enough scrutiny on the outcomes on budget decisions in these areas? And then second question, you know, just how did you identify these areas in particular? So you've got SEND, family time. Was that just on kind of conversations with management, or was it other?
Yeah. So, thanks. If we take the Care Commission one, Care Quality Commission and the Ofsted inspection, clearly they've done an inspection from a service delivery point of view, which they're the experts of that, rather than that, because we're sort of the financial audit side. However, because they've criticised and they say there's an inadequate position of delivery, so we align that to not being an effective use of resources, because you clearly aren't fully being effective of that delivery of that service, and it's significant enough to warrant a significant area review. So what we will be looking at, and I think your point around the savings, is what's the plan both to deliver the improvement in the service so that the inspectorate's happy. That might then lead us into, well, actually, what's that going to cost? Is that being then driven through your next financial budget setting process? You know, is it extra staffing that's needed? Or, you know, depending on what the action plans are there. So it's looking at both the effectiveness of the service and then what's the impact on that. And clearly, from a monitoring point of view, is if there's an action plan, say, from there, is how do the members get involved in that monitoring and delivery of that action plan to make sure that they, from a scrutiny point of view and a governance point of view, is they can see that go through, so they can be happy that actually this has been dealt with. So that's where the Care Quality Commission point on SEND came from. Internal Audit have reported an ineffective, so the family time issue on the children, compliance with the Children's Act, that came from an internal audit report that came to yourselves. So they've likely again got a action plan agreed with the council. So it's just really making sure we understand that. But I think also it's trying to understand and sort of checking through, making sure that where laws or acts need to be delivered, that where does that sit in the council? Is that at the service level, and are they being addressed? Are they being monitored correctly? And again, fed up the governance chain. So hopefully that sort of gives you the view of where we will take those weaknesses, or the risks, as we say at the moment. Because it might be that the actions have all been delivered and there isn't actually a weakness there, it's just at a point in time.
Oslo?
Thank you, and thank you for your report. My question is a little bit linked to James' question about how these risks are identified. Yeah. When I was reading your report, I wondered about something that wasn't in the report, and that's extreme weather preparedness of the council. I'm assuming that the council is responsible for a lot of buildings, and we all know that extreme weather events are becoming more and more frequent, and what will be important for Sheffield is, I think, heavy rains, stuff like that. So what is your opinion on that? Do you think it is a significant financial risk for Sheffield Council, or do you think they are well prepared for it in terms of the buildings they manage? Thank you.
Yeah, so good question. So we consider, if I call it climate change in a sort of a broader sense, we consider that in two different ways. So firstly, through the VFM arrangements, I wouldn't say it's something we're looking at in specific detail at the moment, but clearly we will look at the authority's risk register for consideration of that as an issue. We also look at the suite of policies and procedures through which that will be addressed. So, for example, business continuity, disaster recovery, that sort of issue. When we get to the financial statements audit, we also do a specific risk assessment around climate change in a broad sense, but part of that will be the exposure to assets of severe weather conditions. So again, you know, I'm not saying that this will never happen, but we have to look at it in the near term and the severity of that issue. So as long as authorities have got the processes in place to identify the risk when it arises, then I think that would fall short of a significant weakness in our VFM terminology.
Thank you for that. One of the things that, so you said backstop February, what are we looking at when this comes back? Because one of the things I would say with what's contained in here, I'd like us to be able to robustly recommend to the finance so that we, you know, some of the stuff that's what you put into this report, so that it can inform us when we're taking our budgetary decisions at the end of February. That's what I was.
So we will be returning in November, and the intention at the moment is to produce in November hopefully a draft ISA 260 report, which provides as much information as we can on the financial statements audit. We are also required by the National Audit Office to produce a draft annual Auditors report in November this year. That's a new requirement they've brought in, but it can be draft, so it can be in progress. But again, it's an opportunity to give you an update on the risk areas and what we're doing and what have done by that point. The slight conflict we have, not in an auditor's independent sense, but in a sort of a priorities sense, is we're also tasked this year with restoring assurance as much as we possibly can. So you will recall that you had a disclaimer on the FY23 and then because of that FY24. We now have a work programme working with finance to try and restore that assurance, and we are expected to do as much as we possibly can by the backstop date in order to give it as much chance of restoring assurance. What that, however, means is we probably won't be signing our opinion in which the value for money conclusion sits until that February date. And of course, we need to consider everything right up until that February date before we can conclude and sign the audit in its completion. So we can have a position statement in November, but we will probably not be able to conclude the audit until February.
Thank you for that. And I mean, that's one of the things I was saying as a committee, that's incumbent on us to make sure that we look at what your interim in November report is in November, so that it does get informed back to finance, because obviously the position of the council and the figures that we produce every year have to have some semblance of reality to them, and that's something that we must do, I would say. Anyway, thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much, Matt, for your time this evening. And look forward to seeing you again. Okay. I'll move on to, you're free to go. Item 9, the role of the Audit and Standards Committee and training. And hello, Claire. Welcome, Claire. And I'll hand over to you I'll give you a few seconds to sit down and all that. Thank you very much.
Good evening. This item provides an update to a similar paper brought to the committee last year. Unfortunately, you may have noticed that it's last year's report that's been included in the pack, but earlier today I've sent you the updated report by email, so I'll take you through that and then we'll update the public papers, so huge apologies for that. So this paper focuses on the role of the Audit Committee and the guidance and training that's available to support members, particularly those who are new to this committee. In your pack today, you do have the SIP for position statement, which sets out expectations for how audit committees in local authorities should operate. The committee endorsed this statement in previous years as a model of best practice, and I'm recommending that we continue to do so. To support the statement, I've also circulated before the meeting the SIP for handbook for members, which also includes a self-assessment tool for the committee. This might be useful for the committee to reflect on its own performance and identify any further areas for development. Alongside this guidance, it's important that members have access to appropriate training. So in the paper, I've outlined several suggested areas for training with the aim of spreading sessions out throughout the year. So the key ones I'm recommending are, first, there is a general introduction to audit committees. You'll have the guidance as well, the handbook. This is an external course that's delivered by the author of the SITFA handbook. It runs quarterly and the next session is in November. Some members of the committee actually have attended it previously, so they may want to share their experience of its usefulness. Next is understanding the statement of accounts. This is a key responsibility for the committee. We usually bring in an independent trainer around January time to walk through the accounts, and we plan to do that again. But in addition, we're hoping to run an in-house session with the finance team in kind of October or November when we can get everybody together. Then there's treasury management training. This is usually provided annually to the Finance and Performance Committee. I've spoken to the external Treasury advisors about opening this up to all interested members, and we expect that to take place in spring, so we'll circulate details about that later if you're interested. And finally, risk management. We've previously commissioned tailored training for Sheffield, and we're proposing to do that again, subject to member interest, if that's something that would be useful. I've also included some links for the Local Government Association website. There's a dedicated area for members. You've probably seen it already. There are lots of useful resources there, briefings, bite-sized e-learning modules and such things as that. And finally, I recommend that members hold private sessions with our external auditors during the year without officers being present. This provides an opportunity for you as a group to explore any issues or areas of interest outside this formal committee setting. If there's any other areas that you would like to cover, such as standards, the annual governance statement, internal audit, other things that are on the agenda of this committee, then we can arrange any additional training. I'm also working with colleagues in democratic services to ensure that this feeds into wider member development. So, to summarise, the recommendations are that the committee endorses the SITFA position statement and continues to adopt its principles, and that the committee approves a proposed training programme and considers any additional training needs. Thank you.
I don't see any questions on that. Oh, yes, I do. I see one from Ruth.
Thank you, Claire. I do have a number of questions. Just to start off with, what metrics will be used to assess the return on investment of this training programme, both in terms of our capability as well as the committee performance?
A significant amount of it is delivered in-house or through training that we're already providing. So, for example, the treasury management training is already included in a package of support that we have with our treasury advisors. The only one on there really that is an extra cost is that introductory course, which other members have attended and could say whether that's useful or not, or could share previous slides. And it just supports the handbook that I've already provided. And again, the handbook is part of a publication subscription that we have to have, part of core publications that are required statutory publications. So there isn't really hardly any additional cost at all. I think the metric I'm interested in is are we pitching it at the right level? Do members want to attend this training? Do we get good turnout and from members? So that tells me whether we're pitching it at the right level or the right level of interest.
Okay. And given what you've just said about previous training that has been done February, I think it was, well, really, what safeguards exist to prevent that training from becoming a tick box exercise rather than a driver for real change within the committee?
I mean, I'd recommend the self-assessment tool that's in that guidance handbook, really, that the committee should be self-assessing, you know, whether you've got the right, you're targeting the right areas of the council, and it is quite a useful tool to look at that. And I'd use that, I think, as a self-assessment tool for the committee.
Thank you. And given what we've heard earlier on today by your esteemed colleagues about financial mismanagement, how will this training equip us as members to challenge these complex financial assumptions and detect early warning signs of financial mismanagement?
Well, I think firstly you can take assurance from the fact that we are audited by external auditors who do a very thorough and comprehensive audit of the figures that we're presenting in the financial statements. They also do systems audits, and we have internal audit as well, who also have a programme of work. And external audit don't rely on internal audit, they do their own checks based on their own risk assessments of ours. We are, in terms of the finance team, we are all properly qualified and appropriately trained to produce the accounts. We have safeguards in our financial systems to ensure that that I don't think anything's completely fraud proof, but yeah, as far as we think we can put that in place. But obviously, if there's any recommendations, or we're always learning from things that we find as well.
Thank you. And just a few more questions. What steps are being taken to ensure that the training that is provided is not only inclusive but also accessible to those members with diverse learning styles, backgrounds, time constraints?
I mean, I'd be guided by yourselves on that, really, in terms of how we deliver the training. I mean, obviously, it's whether that you want that out of hours, out of normal office hours or in office hours, whether you want to do it in person or whether you want to do it on, on Teams calls. I'd be guided by you on what the requirements are, and we can tailor it according to what you need.
Thank you. And is there a plan at any point to benchmark this audit committee's training against other local authorities to identify best practice and future innovation?
Yeah, I haven't done so far, but certainly I take that on board, and we can do that, yeah.
And you'll be glad to know, I've got one more question only. How will our feedback be systematically captured, analysed and used to iterate and improve future training programmes?
Again, I'll be guided by you. I think it depends what the feedback is and how we can develop future training, but certainly there's members of the committee who've been on the committee for a while, and it's, if anything is repetitive or some things are necessary around the accounts and signing those off and or being able to understand those so that you can challenge them appropriately. But then I think that, if we're not covering anything or anything that we're missing or anything that's repetitive that is not needed, then please let me know.
Okay. And sorry, just one question from what you've actually just said there. How can we ensure, or will you ensure, that future training remains agile and especially responsive to emerging governance challenges such as cyber risk, for example, or climate-related financial disclosures?
I mean, I'd work Democratic Services on that, I think, in terms of the wider programme around training for members and making sure that it's appropriate.
Thank you.
Here, James.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on the training, I mean, I think certainly some of your earlier questions, Councillor, I think probably need to be answered by the other committee members as well. Like, to what extent did you guys who've been on the training find it useful? I mean, I thought the training that I went on was in February. I thought it could have done a bit more in terms of what you can get out of a set of accounts. I thought it was a little bit dismissive of the usefulness of some of the information I found. I thought it could have been a bit better on some of the the movement analysis, how you look at, and then how you can benchmark it against the sector, and also there's a difficult question of level, because obviously there's a really wide range of yeah.
I guess the difficulty is that we all understand numbers differently, and I know the training or the gentleman that led the training in February does a lot of training for other local authorities, and not just for members but also for staff officers as well. And I did feel at times it was pitched maybe a bit too high, but we didn't actually get anything to take away from that apart from just listening for a couple of hours. And given some of the better training I've been on, it's always something that you can take away with you.
And I've heard that from members who've attended that. I mean, it's a very technical, prescriptive document that you're being asked to approve as well. So it is very difficult to try and turn that into something more meaningful. And that is a challenge for financial reporting generally. And it's something that CIPFA are looking at. And there are going to be some quite significant changes to how those statements are presented coming up. They're in consultation at the moment with government about simplifying them, making them more understandable. But in terms of the training, obviously that independent trainer is there just to really take you through it and help you to try and penetrate it a little bit, but he's only got 2 hours, and that's why we thought that if we do a more informal session, kind of a page turn, and you know, just with the finance staff, and it's a lot less formal, and you can just ask anything, and we'll try and help demystify it as much as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think yeah. I see no questions. That's very, very informative. Thank you, Claire. One of the things, obviously, bear in mind, because we are the Audit and Standards Committee, that we should have some standards training as appropriate. I'll move on to the recommendation, which is the Audit and Standards Committee is recommended to read and adopt the SIPFA position statement and audit committees and agree a training programme to support members of the committee with their role, which you got there. So as soon as possible and at the appropriate levels as possible. Thank you very much. I'll move on now. Thank you very much, Claire, for that. Very informative. I'll move on to item 10. Let Dave get down to... Right. Thank you, David. I'll hand over to you when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. This is the what is supposedly the 6-monthly update on standards, but this covers a slightly longer period. It covers 8 months. It covers the period January to August. This is always a slightly difficult report to present because the details of each individual complaint are confidential, and so we're just giving some detail about what's gone through without going into the detail of each complaint. But I hope to be able to give an idea of the activity that's going on in this sphere and some of the themes that are emerging from it, if there are any themes. I'd just like to say before I go into that I continue to be assisted by the Deputy Monitoring Officers in administering standards complaints and the support from Sarah Hyde in Democratic Services. So I wanted to thank those and also to note the invaluable contribution of the independent persons, not the independent co-opted members, but the independent persons who provide not only support and challenge for the monitoring officers and deputy monitoring officers when they have conduct of these standards complaints, but also provide support to members who may be the subject of an investigation as well. So that is a very important role. In that period, there was a total of 20 complaints. 14 have been concluded and 6 are still open. Of those 6, 2 are subject to an investigation due to the disputed nature of the facts, and they will proceed to a hearing subcommittee in due course. You'll see that 6 have not been taken forward, either rejected or not a standards issue or other reasons. There's usually a number of different reasons for why things aren't taken forward. In the period of this report, some of the matters that were complained of were actually service issues and were rerouted through and dealt with as service issues. Others were made against the council as a whole rather than named councillors and covered disagreeing with decisions as opposed to actually raising standards issues. So that's quite often why they're rejected. What we tend to see in each period are complaints about members choosing not to take up matters or being seen not to have reached a successful conclusion on a matter. And again, those aren't standards issues, and we try to deal with those in a different way. You'll see that there were 8 informal resolutions during this period. They actually all related to one incident, and that was a matter that was dealt with through training. 2 complaints related to a parish council, and that's not, we haven't had many complaints in relation to parish councils in the recent past. I know that in some areas parish councils can be problematic. It's not something we've had here, but there are 2 complaints in this period in relation to parish councils. What I would say is that through the subject matter of these complaints, and even though some have not been resolved, how they've been dealt with, there's nothing that's arisen in this period that raises any concerns or evidence of systemic failures or any particular training needs that are identified through these. Whilst some are going through and have been dealt with, they are particular to their facts and don't raise systemic issues. But as a monitoring officer, I do look for those things coming through the reported standards complaints to decide whether that possibility is arising and would take action if need be.
Any questions, Matt?
Yeah, it was just so in 3.7 on page 57, there was 3 complaints that no action was taken, and it was just about the wording. I think it's a bit vague because one of them is no intention of dishonesty found. I think I can understand that, and the other one is like no evidence provided. It was the no action taken or no breach because non-response by counsellor, and it's really not clear is that did the counsellor make a complaint? Did the counsellor that the complaint was against didn't respond, or is a resident complaining that a counsellor didn't respond?
Yeah, thank you. That is that category that I mentioned in my opening, where it's a complaint that a counsellor hadn't picked up a matter that had been referred to them. It is a matter for each counsellor what matters that come into their casework that they wish to take up. So that was an example of one of those.
So just to come back on that which I think is reasonable enough, but the language, if you're just reading it, you go, oh, like if you just don't respond, someone can get away with it. So maybe just tying up the language for next time so it's clear what non-response is.
It was, yes. I had spotted that and then didn't get it corrected before it was issued. So yes, it will be clearer in the next one.
It's a clarity of the English, which we had picked up in a pre-meeting, but didn't action, can I say. Any further questions for this? I've just got one question. How many complaints are being dealt with within the 12-week timescale? Have we got as prescribed in the council's rules?
I don't have that information to hand. Actually, as I was preparing this, it was something I did think of that would usefully be included next time. So I can get that information for this period, but I'll make sure that in the future reports that the timescales that they're dealt with is also included as well.
Thank you very much for that, Dave. You can come back to your seat next to me. The Audit and Standards Committee is recommended to note the report. I see no. Okay. And whilst this is happening, item 11, the work programme, I'll hand over to Philippa to lead on this item.
Thank you, Chair. The work programme is in your pack from page 65 onwards. There's just a couple of small changes since it went to press. As was mentioned earlier in the meeting, the draft annual Auditors report will be coming to the meeting on the 20th of November. Alongside that, from October to November, the formal response to audit ISA 260 recommendations, that's moved from October to November to sit with the draft annual Auditors report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I see any questions on the work programme? I don't. Thank you very much for that report, Philippa. The Audit and Standards Committee is recommended to approve the work programme. I see no dissent. We'll move on to the item 11, the date of the next meeting, which will be held on 16th of October at 5 p.m. And just once again, thank you, James, for your time on the committee. And apparently people have valued the work that you've done. Good.
Thank you, James.